Interpreting for children. Multiple studies have shown that the first years of a child's life constitutes a crucial period for their development and for their growth. This includes all the areas that form the evolution and growth of a child: the affective area, the cognitive area, the social and the physical development area. We are going to define development as a process of change in which the child acquires the ability to master increasingly more complex levels of movement, of thought, of feelings, and of their ability to interact and connect with people and the objects that surround them. Physical, emotional, and mental care is fundamental in the overall global development of a child. Learning is also crucial for development and is defined, we are going to define it here, as the process of acquiring knowledge, abilities, habits, and values from experimentation, observation, reflection, and from study and instruction. This was defined by Mayer in 1995. Evans has also been another scholar who has worked on the psycho-emotional development of children. Child development is a complex process as well as continuous, through which the child acquires growing abilities that become more complex to be able to move, to coordinate, to think, to feel and to interact with others and with the environment. The development begins before birth and it continues throughout the cycle of life. I was talking about development, about growth, but development and growth are not synonymous. While growth is defined as a change in size and is more focused on everything that has to do with the physical changes, development is characterized by the ability to acquire more complex and functional skills to solve different situations, to solve different conflicts which appear through life. So we know that growth has to do with the size, with the shape, and development has to do with all the skills that the children develop, that humans acquire and which become more complex throughout life. So development is a multidimensional process which includes a psychomotor dimension, which is the ability to move and coordinate, and emotional dimension, which is the ability to feel. Here we can also include the ability of self-confidence. And also a social dimension, which is the ability that human beings have to establish relationships with other human beings. These dimensions are interconnected and must be considered in an integrated way. All children develop according to a sequence or a general scheme. We can see that. The children are born, they can crawl, then they walk, then they acquire the ability to start talking. So this sequence is general and includes all human beings. But the pace and the quality of this process is individual. It's subjective and varies from child to child and from culture to culture. As well as the health care or food, protection is the most important for the growth and development of a child. It is the quality and the kind of the interpersonal interactions with other adults or with other children that will determine the way in which each child grows and develops. It is from the interactions that the children develop increasingly more complex levels of action, more complex of thought, with greater ability and complexity in their emotions and their affectivity, and their social interaction, which also becomes more complex. From the first weeks of pregnancy, a multiplication of the cells that form our brain is carried out. These cells are called neurons. They don't exist until the second week of pregnancy, but more or less in the 20th week of pregnancy, our brain already has 100,000 million neurons, all linked together in a huge network that reaches yet in our early childhood some quadrillion of connections. The neurons are differentiated by groups, functions, and by genetically differentiated spaces, establishing interaction programs with the environment in which we live. The stimuli of the environment modify the connections that our neurons establish among themselves, and they allow us to perceive the world around us, processing the information that we receive and reacting differently to them. Since Freud, founder of psychoanalysis, which is a science or a technique more like within psychology that studies the psyche, it has been proven that in the first year of development, from conception to 5 years, the foundations of skills and competencies which will affect learning, behavior, and health throughout life are established. We are born with a brain, but in addition, we are also born with a psyche. This is the most important thing that Freud discovered. From his clinical work, he began to observe that in certain patients, physical symptoms that had no neurological correlate or any organic correlate happened. From there onwards, an enormous source of experimentation began, where he started to work and to discover what those phenomena which appeared in the human body of his patients were about, that had physical connotations, but whose origin could not be sought from the neurological standpoint. Therefore, we are born with a brain, and we are also born with a psyche that's in the process of organization. While their structures are maturing biologically on one hand, on the other hand, the psyche structures itself from the care and the relationship that the child has with the adults that surround him. What do I mean with this? That although as human beings we have a biological basis that will determine part of a behavior, what defines us the most and structures us and allows us to grow and develop doesn't have as much to do with the biological standpoint, although it is based on it, as with the relationship that the child has with the adults that surround him in the early stages of his life. One of the most significant discoveries in the organization of neural networks is the importance of external stimuli. This was a study that Shaw did in the year 2000. This way, research will confirm that the way in which the parents interact with the child in the early years and the experience they can stimulate or provide have a significant impact on the child's cognitive, emotional, physical, and social development. I invite you now to watch a video about the stages and the development of a child from birth to the first 5 years of life. I'll see you in a bit.